Hello and welcome to Planet Money. I'm David Kestenbaum. And you're Jacob Goldstein.
Right. Today on the show, reality by the numbers. What the spreadsheet has done to us. I recently came across this article from 1984. It's an article about this new, possibly dangerous thing that is about to transform the world. The spreadsheet, the thing we think of today as Microsoft Excel.
The article talks about how this weird thing is going to totally transform business. But it also has this warning. The spreadsheet is a tool, and it is also a worldview, reality by the numbers. The article spends a long time sort of dwelling on this. What does it mean when people start to think that numbers are reality? What will it do to the world?
There was a time when a spreadsheet was an actual sheet.
11 inches by 17 inches. Spreadsheet gives you a detailed way to look at really any business. If you're in the chocolate business, you would put into a spreadsheet the cost of cocoa, the cost of sugar, your taxes, your rent, salaries, all that stuff.
Also sales, right? How much money you're going to get for the stuff you sell.
Money, not to spend it. Then you would do a whole lot of arithmetic. And at the end of that, you would have a pretty detailed picture of your business and how it was doing.
And if you're running the chocolate factory, you get your accountant to do this for you. You go to a guy like Alan Snyder and say, put together this spreadsheet for me. And that could take Alan and his whole team days. Once he'd built this thing, it would have hundreds of different numbers running around. And then it never failed. The guy who ran the factory would come to Alan and say, what if I spent just a little more on cocoa? What would that mean for my business?
That little question would mean a lot of work for Alan.
You take out that large eraser and start erasing each of these. You take out a calculator, then you'd have to re-add, cross-add each column. And then you'd have different tax results, different accrual result. You'd have a different cash result. Every column had to be changed.
Alan said it could take a day to run all the numbers, and that was just when the client had asked for one tiny little tweak.
So it's the late 70s, and not far from where Alan is, there's a guy named Dan Bricklin. The future inventor of the spreadsheet is, at this moment in our story, sitting in class at Harvard Business School. Up at the blackboard, there's a professor doing some spreadsheet-type math.
I thought it's kind of silly that we're writing on this blackboard. If only we had a blackboard where I could erase a number and write a new number in, and everything would recalculate.
The Apple II computer had come out. It's a computer, finally, that you could have at home. You could put it on your desk. But at the time, most people thought of it as a toy, like a video game console.
Bricklin thought it could do what accountants were doing on paper with their giant spreadsheets and their erasers. So he wrote a little program for the Apple II. He needed some way for the user to move around the screen to enter in the numbers, and there was no mouse.
The Apple II had paddles for playing Pong.
So he used those.
But paddle was a huge pain in the ass. He wound up ditching it and going with the arrow keys. But anyways, his program, the thing he built, it actually worked.
You would put a number in and hit return, and everything would recalculate.
Next, he hooks up with his old friend, Bob Frankston, also a computer guy.
A guy today known as the co-creator of the spreadsheet.
And Frankston and Bricklin start giving demos around town, basically showing this prototype to guys like Alan Snyder, to accountants with big erasers. Alan Snyder saw an early demo, did not get it.
The time it finally made sense to him is when he actually saw it being used in the real world, and he was like, oh, it's a spreadsheet. It's a giant piece of paper inside the computer.
This happened for him not long after that super confusing demo. At a local computer shop, the owner was testing out this program for Dan Bricklin, using it for the store. When the spreadsheet software actually sold under the name VisiCalc, Alan became the first registered owner. Spreadsheet user number 1.
This was like a godsend. You wouldn't have to do this drudgery work over and over and over again.
It was a godsend, but it was also a threat because the computer could do in seconds what it used to take someone an entire day to do. In fact, the computer was better at it. The computer didn't make mistakes. If it only takes a couple hours to do a spreadsheet and you're billing by the hour, you're going to make less money for a particular job. You're going to need fewer workers. You're going to need to get rid of some people.
And if you look at the numbers, the national jobs data from the government, you can see this. A lot of people got replaced by software.
Dan Bricklin thought about this when he was inventing the spreadsheet.
That was an issue I had to come to terms with.
Technology is a double-edged sword.
The spreadsheet both killed jobs and it created jobs.
Since 1980, right around the time the electronic spreadsheet came out, 400,000 bookkeeping and accounting clerk jobs have gone away. But 600,000 accounting jobs have been added.
Accounting basically became cheaper. And sometimes when something gets cheaper, people buy a lot more of that thing.
And when something gets cheaper, people buy a lot more.
Alan said clients bought more accounting. They called up, asking him to run more numbers for them. If you're that person who owned the chocolate factory, you can now call up Alan Snyder and ask all kinds of questions. Normally, it would have been very expensive to do it out on paper, but now it was much cheaper. So people asked a lot more questions.
VisiCalc becomes the $99 piece of software that makes people go out and buy the $2,000 computer, way beyond accountant. Spreadsheets basically gave birth to modern Wall Street, to this world we have today.
Obsessed with this what-if question. What if we got a slightly better interest rate on our loan? What if these two companies merged? What if we structured the deal this way? Wall Street is a place where change one number, you move pennies around in a spreadsheet, change something at the third decimal place, and suddenly at the bottom of the spreadsheet, the last number is $1 million larger.
And so because of this, the spreadsheet becomes the language of Wall Street. Today, the spreadsheet is the way people in finance talk to each other. It's the way they decide, is this $1 billion deal? Is this a $950 million deal? Should we do this deal at all? Wall Street is basically a bunch of Excel spreadsheets flying back and forth.
For first prize of the 2014 Financial Modeling World Championships, Diarmuid Early.
Diarmuid works literally on Wall Street at the Deutsche Bank office down by the New York Stock Exchange. If you've ever wondered what it looks like inside a big fancy office tower on Wall Street, you can just picture row after row, office after office of people staring at spreadsheets. In this building right now, how many?
Probably thousands of people at this exact moment using spreadsheets.
Here, the mouse is for the slow. If you're a badass like Diarmuid, you use the keyboard.
I probably know several hundred Excel keyboard shortcuts.
That spreadsheet article from 1984 basically predicted all of this. Quote, a virtual cult of the spreadsheet has formed, complete with gurus and initiates, detailed lore, arcane rituals, and an unshakable belief that the way the world works can be embodied in rows and columns of numbers and formulas.
The article worries about that unshakable belief. Quote, people tend to forget that even the most elegantly crafted spreadsheet is a house of cards ready to collapse at the first erroneous assumption.
Turns out that was actually a fine worry to have.
You may remember the story from a couple of years ago about a trader at J.P. Morgan who lost the bank $6 billion, partly a spreadsheet error.
I talked with Matt Levine recently. Matt used to work at Goldman Sachs. Now he writes for Bloomberg. And Levine says somebody built a spreadsheet to estimate how risky the group's trades were. But
there was one cell where he had to divide by the average of two numbers, and he divided by the sum of those two numbers, and he forgot to put in the 2 at the end. And so that showed half as much risk as they actually had. Everyone was deceived about how much risk they had.
Spreadsheets look really good. It feels like truth, no matter what goes into them. Someone brings a spreadsheet into a meeting. It looks so precise. It's got numbers and graphs and pretty fonts. It feels like it's telling you exactly how the world is. Of course, it's just a model.
It's particularly a problem with spreadsheets because they're very easy to use. It's really easy for a 22-year-old right out of college to use Excel and to build something that really looks like a cool model.
Most people are smart enough to understand the difference between the model and reality. He says most of the time people get the math right. So on balance, spreadsheets, it says, actually a good tool. They give us more information. They help people make better decisions. It's a win. It's a net plus.
Spreadsheets have left us in a different world, though. It's a world where we are constantly asking what if, not just accountants and people on Wall Street, all of us. What if I flew Thursday instead of Friday? What if I took 78 instead of Route 280? What if I stopped exercising? What if I ate more vegetables?
Diarmuid, our Excel champ, can actually answer those questions for you because he built a spreadsheet. A couple of years ago, he wanted to start tracking all this personal information, so he whipped up a little spreadsheet, enters all this data every day, and now he's got all these pretty graphs of his weight and his exercise. Totally normal, right? Like, doesn't even seem weird anymore. That article that inspired this show, it was called A Spreadsheet Way of Knowledge by a guy named Stephen Levy.
Can I make a confession?
Go on.
I have a spreadsheet where I track my electricity meter. Ooh. So I can see what difference it makes if I take a shorter shower.
I'm not saying ooh because you use a spreadsheet or you're a nerd. I'm saying ooh because it's so cheap it's painful.
Knowledge is not always good.
How much does a shower cost?
About $1.
Really?
More in winter.
$1 for one shower?
Bath for the kids last night was like $1.50. And when something gets cheaper, people buy a lot more of that thing.